It's difficult, and Andy and I have been half joking about being the last stretch of the conference and speaking there. So thank you very much for being here. I hope I will make it interesting enough for you to find it worthwhile. I promise I will not run over time. I want to make sure that we don't do that, but I find it relevant to talk a little bit about turnkey solutions, and I think it's worthwhile to talk about because we all have some experiences of more or less successful operations in healthcare simulation, and the idea here is there any way to address that? Very quickly about me, I've done simulation in healthcare for about 20 years. By training, I'm an anesthesiologist. Set up and worked in and managed 2 simulation centers before I joined the company. And in dark history, I once was a president of SESAM, the Society in Europe for Simulation Applied to Healthcare. And right now within CAE, I'm in charge of the international branch of the academy. So Mandy, who you know very well by now, is part of that team, obviously, and Petra, who is probably still outside. Okay, so we all probably have made experiences in our journey in medical education with different moods. So sometimes we have good days, sometimes we have bad days, and sometimes it's just in between and indifferent. That's an individual experience, but I think maybe you, certainly I know centers that more or less are constantly in one of these moods. And I have seen a number of places that are not always happy. So there are not smiling faces all around. And the question is a little bit, why is that happening, and is there anything we can do around that? And basically the question is, how good are we in what we are doing? How good is the story we can tell? And basically, is it a success story? And some of you may know this picture. This is a simulator that's called Sim1. That's been built by an anesthesiologist, and his name was Abramson. And you see, it looks very much like Star Trek, I think. So you needed a room full of computer to control it. It was computerized, and it was a mannequin that had a model of pharmacology, apparently. You could interact with that. And this was in 1967. So coincidentally, it's 50 years old. So we have the opportunity now to look back over 50 years of modern, high-tech healthcare education using simulation. At least this is when it started. And I would like to ask a few questions, and you don't have to answer them publicly, but maybe you want to think about that, what we have achieved in that time, where we went from this, when it was just one simulator in the world, and it was very exotic and just a research tool, and probably a nice toy for those who built it. But one of the big dreams that we have, like in aviation, we would like to have legal regulation that says everybody has to go to the simulator. Everybody has to repeatedly train on the simulator every 6 months, certificates, assessments, regulation, the whole story that we know from aviation. And I think you agree there are islands here, there are islands there, and there are attempts otherwise, but there's no worldwide regulation, no national regulation that covers everybody. In fact, I think we are far away from that. So the question is, how successful are we? How easy is it to get to simulation? Is there a threshold? Is there a hurdle? Are there obstacles that we need to overcome to get there, to find educators, to bring people, to pull them out of their clinical work and actually have them spend the time on the simulator? And I'm not talking just about the fact that maybe some people are shy and feel, this is something strange. I really think we pull them out of their clinical work, and how easy is that? That leads to the question, do we have enough staff? Who actually are those people? Do you feel alone sometimes? Do you think you have enough? Do you do everything on the weekend, in the evenings? Is it just depending on your personal enthusiasm? And in general, the level of activity of your simulation center. And I can share with you that I've seen centers that were well equipped, that had a nice building, but the level of activity is relatively low. So if you will, it's not a success story everywhere. And if you measure on the things that we probably want to achieve, to give that to everybody, we have not been as successful as we wish we would be. And this is a little bit of an unhappy start of a of a presentation. I realize that, but I would like to paint that picture. And it's not just me being in a bad mood talking about that. I travel a little bit more than 100 days a year in the world, and I see some happy centers again, but a number of places that are less than ideally run, less than as successful as they probably wish they would be and than they could be. So the question is, how do you get to some kind of a success? In principle, one of the issues is with us, and it has to do with how we approach healthcare education and simulation specifically. We all, and I certainly did when I was 20 years or 25 years younger, started out with a lot of enthusiasm. So this was the thing to do. This was the great technology. This was something new. This could be the revolution in education and in healthcare. So all of this, I put it in simulation. It's not that I don't think this is the case anymore. I just think this enthusiasm alone is not enough. It allows you to find money maybe once to buy a simulator, maybe twice for another simulator. Maybe you find a sponsor who builds a big center for lots of simulators, but necessarily enthusiasm alone does not carry the operation of the simulation center. My strong belief is what we would like to do is to bring value to whatever organization we are attached to. So that could be a hospital, that could be a university, that could be any kind of healthcare-related institution. And we probably can easily agree that there are problems, and our journey should be aiming at solving these problems. So if we realize our organization has an issue, we would like to address that issue. It's not, oh great, we are doing education. We rather would like to contribute to the success. And one way to do that is to think about the pain of your boss or your boss's boss, maybe somebody who has an interest in the success of the organization, and you can catch their attention by talking about how you can work getting to that success instead of annoyingly asking for money all the time. So that could be something. Analyze what you need to do. And I think before we all agree that we need to buy this wonderful new mannequin, it's probably a good idea to think about what you try to achieve and do a training needs analysis and then find the appropriate tool. One thing that I personally think, and this leads into the topic of the conversation a little bit more, I think we don't need to do everything alone. There are other people who have done something, who went through an experience, who have made, or who found a solution. So why don't we work with them and maybe even outsource part of that what we do. A partnership in that respect with a company that builds simulator, that could be CAE in previous times, starts typically with the sale of something, a box, equipment, simulation, whatever, a simulator inside the box. And for a while, we've been very proud. When you bought a box, you also got a training. So somebody came and showed you what to do with that. And then for a long period of time, maybe 5 years, that was the relationship. It was a vendor-customer relationship. And then maybe after 5 years, that whatever was in the box needed replacement and maybe another training for that. This, in a way, describes a number of relationships between CAE and customers in history, and probably other companies as well. Today, our approach, I think, could be a little bit different. Before you buy a box, and especially when you say, oh, we need lots of those because we want to build a big simulation center, we should have a conversation, a question, what are you trying to achieve with what you want to buy? So something that helps you to be successful. It also could be a question of where are you going to work? I have seen, I don't know, 50, 100 simulation centers, and a number of other people have done that as well. And I've seen things that I did like and maybe others not, so we can share that and give you feedback. And maybe you really want to buy something, but it doesn't have to be a box. Maybe in this case, it's more appropriate to buy something I don't know, a ball, something that's round-shaped and is a different product than you initially thought. And maybe you need a training intervention, but not that standardized training, but something specific. And maybe another one, so it doesn't have to be finished with this one. And after some time, maybe it's a good opportunity to review the situation. Is this still what you need, or would you need something else? Would you need an additional box, or would you need another type of equipment, maybe something that's been tailored? This, I think, is a little bit more appropriate if you want to run a professional simulation center. And this only talks about equipment and how to use it. You also need educators. So do you have enough of those? I would like to challenge that, because every country that I visit tells me we don't have enough healthcare workers. Not the country tells me, people that I talk to. And then, of course, out of this limited pool, you want an additional group that has an extra qualification, being educators. And when they work, you need to pull them out. So where do you find these? And then you need clinicians, subject matter experts, who sometimes also come from the clinical world and share their experience. And then maybe a center says, well, really, I don't know how to manage my place, so I need to somebody who runs that. And maybe over time, several quarters, several years, and so on. And then with more equipment and a more professional operation, maybe you need somebody who takes care of the equipment, who could be a specialist in that field. So instead of doing this and doing that, and in between having not a relationship, I think a partnership can involve all of that. And that's what I think can help to make a simulation center successful, especially if we look at what do you try to achieve and how can we help you in addition to giving you equipment. A training needs analysis is really an interactive workshop that takes place over time, takes at least several days. These are examples of workshops we have provided. So we talk to stakeholders, we ask them for answers on specific questions. We try to understand their education system, and typically it ends with a report that we return, and that could involve a solution. If you talk about the building that somebody wants to use, we can also help with that. We have been involved with construction and equipment of that. And we also have been asked, before somebody even invests in a building, what would be required. So this is a plan that we received from a university that wants to build a simulation center and says, well, you probably have seen some. Maybe you can help us before we start, even to talk to the architects, what would be required to go in there. So these kind of things are a way to be more successful. On top of that, I guess we are all interested in finding appropriate training solutions. So right before the break, we had a conversation about train the trainer activities, and I think that goes far beyond the fact that somebody needs to know how to use equipment. The equipment is just a tool. Of course, you need to be aware how it works and how to make the best use of it, but it should not distract you from your educational task, from the goal you want to achieve. So our offering here in that case certainly is relatively diverse, and it's not standardized in the way that this is the only thing that's possible. So in this analysis, what would be needed for a certain organization, a train the trailer element is probably useful as well. And there are lots of offerings out there, in part because a lot of centers say, well, we have a training center, we have done a few things so we can train other people as well, which is probably true to an extent, but if you would like to find a professional solution, that may or may not be enough. When I looked at simulation, I had in mind a mannequin. This was the first type of simulator I've ever seen. When I think about simulation in aviation, this is what comes to mind. It's a full flight simulator. They're also called cockpit simulator. These are the devices that move on these stills. And you have 3 people also sitting inside, and the price is about 10 to 20 million a piece. And the centers that run these typically operate them 24 hours a day and more than 360 days per year, just because they're so expensive. In aviation, is this all they do that has to do with simulation? No. They specify their training media according to the training need that they have analyzed before. And I would like to encourage us to do the same. So this is the tip of the iceberg. This is what we see when we hear somebody talk about simulation in aviation. In fact, before somebody goes here, they go to a procedural trainer. So if you only need to learn, I don't know, how to navigate, how to understand your weather radar, in which sequence to start your engines, you don't do it here, you probably do it there. And if it's only knowledge, so if you don't have a motor skill involved, something like that, training is e-learning in aviation. So not even classroom aviation. So if a pilot receives information about a new procedure, there's no book, there is no classroom, there is no travel, there is e-learning. And this in a way is streamlining, but it also is a way to find the appropriate method for each learning task. While in healthcare, a lot of what we try to achieve is using mannequins. So we think frequently, at least, simulation is this. And I would like to encourage us to say, yeah, in many cases that's true, but in other cases, you might like to be interested in a procedural trainer. Doesn't have to be a neurosurgical simulator, but this is a good example, I think. And there's also e-learning or screen-based simulation. This here was motivated by the American Society of Anesthesiology because they were looking for a solution that allows ease of success. So it was just not feasible to bring all the anesthesiologists for the recertification to simulation centers. There were 40 in the US. That means almost everybody has to travel. If somebody travels away from the hospital, they don't have income because they don't treat patients on that day, and the hospital doesn't have income because they have to close an operating theater. Plus, for some people, it was embarrassing. So ease of access, I think, is an important piece, and everything that we do has to have that in mind. So it is difficult to get people out of the OR, out of their clinical work, into the simulation center as trainers because they have that extra qualification and extra experience, but it's also difficult to get the learners in there, and all have to be there in the same place at the same time, which makes it very difficult. So taking away 4 anesthesiologists in my department has always been an issue at the same time. So that cannot be the best solution that we can come up with. Another example is this. Most of you probably have played with HoloLens and had some experience with that. And I would like you to understand it's a great toy. Yes, it's big fun. It's impressive. But what it also is something that gives you an opportunity to learn more without the constant attention of an educator. So a lot of the experience that you can get in Vimedics is experience that you can do on your own and have a conversation with an educator at one point in time, but not constantly. Nobody has to hold your hand all the time. Once you know how that works, you know how to communicate with HoloLens, you can pull out the organs, you can walk around, you can move them. There are target cut planes in the Vimedics that give you an idea what to look at to be successful. So all of that is a way to make education a little bit more automatic, and only occasionally have to have contact with an educator. Remember, staffing was an issue. We have the academy, and we are proud to work in that area as well. One example is we equipped in an emergency operation, really, an academic institution in the US. This is GRU as an example where they needed a manager for their simulation center and were asking for us. And the manager really had to set up very specifically the operation there in a last minute effort. So that's a good example of an institution that is lacking the resources, but that's a dramatic example. I'm sure we all have seen something like that. Somebody is unavailable, somebody cannot come to the center to teach because there's an emergency going on. Somebody could come, but is really not interested to be a teacher in the simulation center, and so on and so on and so on. So these are issues that can be addressed by proper staffing. We truly believe in having relationships with professional societies. That almost leads already to Andy's conversation. But this example here is a simulation center set up in the European Society of Anesthesiology conference that happened a few weeks ago. And that society used space in the industrial exhibition. And the industrial exhibition is expensive space because they like to sell that, these societies. But the ESA decided to use that space to build up a simulation center. The size of the simulation center, you get an idea that a lot of people in here, but you see maybe these are glass walls, so some people are looking from outside into the simulation center. I would say the temporary simulation center at the ESA annual conference 4 weeks ago was about the size of this room. So there was an operating theater with a debriefing room. There was a training area for ultrasound that has also been used for airway management training. And there was a center technology area where we could control everything. So this was a huge investment from the society, exciting for us, exciting for the participants, but exciting because the societies really are owners, if you will, of the knowledge, of the rules, of the guidelines on what should be taught, how and why. So we believe in cooperation with that. See, we don't think a simulation center needs to come up with a curriculum. We are the ones who need to implement an existing curriculum into the tools that we use, and maybe if there is no curriculum, then we need to sit down with the organization to build one, but typically it exists already and we need to make sure it works with the tools that we provide. So all of that, I think, has to be part of a successful operation of a simulation center, and the list may or may not sound very exciting, but it certainly is different from a center that only lives on enthusiasm. That's not enough. It is needed, certainly, like in everything that we do, but that's not enough to maintain a long-term operation that is successful. If you're only enthusiastic, if you cannot prove your value, if you don't measure, if you do not talk to your boss or to your boss's boss and find out what you can do to help this person, it's unlikely that your activity is going to be sustainable, because at one point in time somebody will say, why am I paying money? Why am I investing this? Why am I releasing people from the clinical world into your center if you cannot explain to me what that helps for the organization? So I really think that's relevant, and we are happy to be part of work in that field and to be a partner. I think we are all on a journey. I remember when I was running a simulation center, I sometimes felt like this, somehow up in the air. Certainly I was moving somewhere and it was going up, which is great, but it also felt a little bit awkward and insecure. And maybe one of the other of you has a similar feeling, and I would like to ensure you that we are there to be a partner in combination of the academy, equipment, engineering, experience, the things that we do. We see a number of things, and we have some experience and idea that we are happy to share and help you to find the appropriate solution. We are still happy to sell these boxes. We are certainly happy to do that, but we really are interested in your success and not in that short-term deal only. So talk to us a little bit more. I think this conference is an opportunity to see that we have a number of things to bring to the table, and I invite you to have more conversations on that topic than Mandy and I already had. So this is that. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I'm also happy to hand over to Andy Anderson. So are there any questions right now? That's not the case. Thank you very much. Or that we have known each other. So Andy Anderson is somebody that I like as a person, and I've worked with him in several roles, and I think it's very relevant to listen to him in the role of CEO from...
Thanks. Thank you, Stefan. And it's a pleasure to close the conference. Thank you for staying till the end. I, as Stefan said, is the Chief Executive for ASPIH. I'll tell you a little bit about that for those of you perhaps not from this country who might not know about us. But I want to give you a vision of the future, really. But before I start, I just want you to try and read this, and you'll find that actually you can read this, those of you who can read it, see it rather. because one of the things I'm told is I'm not good at is attention to detail. So there'll be some spelling mistakes in these slides probably, but one of the things that we've learned in the simulation world is that the brain is very clever. And you can read this despite the fact it's all mixed up. The brain can decipher words. So I always put this slide up just as a defense against spelling mistakes in case you see any, because it doesn't matter because you can read it anyway. The first session this morning was about cognitive simulation, and I just want you to imagine a few things. So think about these things in your brain for a minute. Imagine a world where there was high-quality education programs delivered by experts available to everybody on any device, anywhere, at any time. Imagine a world where you can capture data from that learning and measure people's track on the learning journey and their knowledge attainment processes. Imagine a national accredited simulation-based education program where it was mandatory for all frontline staff to go through those programs. Imagine a world where medical and nursing students had to pass national exams, a single national exam, to measure competence, and that those exams were based around simulated practice as the main vehicle. Imagine a revalidation world where accepted evidence performance it was coming from simulated environments that were equal to, or in some cases even better than, the real world. And imagine that there existed a national approved program combining e-learning, simulated practice, assessment, individual and organisational competence measures for something like sepsis, a single national program across the country. And finally, all new medical devices, perhaps, introduced into the healthcare system had to be approved in a simulated environment as part of a NICE assessment. And the NICE assessment is the UK National Institute of Clinical Excellence, and they approve new things going into the healthcare system. And the role of the simulation educator or the healthcare simulation technicians were accredited, recognised, and that those qualifications were accepted across the world. So just imagine that world for a minute, and finally imagine me as manager of Manchester United, and I'll come to that right at the end. But over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you that actually, and Stefan led into this really nicely, that over the 50 years we've come an awful long way, and that we're an awful long way closer to getting to this world than perhaps you might think. My background is a commercial one, so I worked for a number of commercial companies, set up my own company called Crawford Medical in 1999, and ended up through a serendipitous number of contacts, distributing for 6 years medical simulation, including some of the early products now marketed by CAE. And in those days, virtual reality simulators retailed at somewhere around £40,000-50,000, and I can tell you that was quite a tough sell, because people didn't really accept simulation could be anything like practicing on patients in the real world. That has significantly changed now. I spent some time working at NHS Portsmouth, running their simulation centre, and HCAT was the national training programme for workplace-based assessment, which is now endemic across the medical curriculum in the UK and the nursing curriculum, looking at measuring how people did in the workplace. And there is still a connection back from that workplace into simulated practice. Spent a little bit of time actually with CAE again, and worked with a company that launched some diagnostic products. But my primary role over the last 5-6 years has been as CEO of ASPIH. And we have a wide network across the simulation and technology enhanced learning world. We work with various organizations to try and promote and expand the role of simulation, and our annual conference now attracts around 500 delegates. So this is my only advertising plug. Our annual conference this year is in Telford, 6th to 8th of November, and attracts, as I said earlier, 500 or so delegates. But it's really a very collegiate and collaborative conference, and one of the main aims of ASPIH has been to connect medical, nursing, and other disciplines, and it's a genuinely multidisciplinary conference, which I think is relatively unusual. We're a not-for-profit company, and we are, I think I'm right in saying, the premier national association outside the USA, probably matched with Australia and one or two European countries. But in terms of a national association, I think we're probably one of the most developed in terms of where we are relative to the health service. So what's our universe? Whoops. What's our universe? And for those of you not from the UK, this slide will be gobbledygook in some cases, because one thing that the NHS certainly has is a language all of its own based around acronyms. But we connect our members, with all of the organisations that influence and help us develop simulated practice across the UK. So Health Education England is the government body responsible for HEE, the education of all healthcare professionals. And we are increasingly being asked now, and I think this is a symptom of where simulation has arrived, to talk to regulators like the GMC and the NMC who regulate practice. And we connect with our primary membership-based universities and hospital trusts, or increasingly now social care as well. But we also connect with international organisations like the Global Network for Simulation in Health, Society of Simulation Health in the US, CESAM, the European organisation, and as you heard this morning, in Axel. And part of our job is to understand what's going on globally and bring it back to our UK practice and let our members know what is relevant to them. So we have a number of aims which you can read here, but I'm just going to pick up the last one there. Use simulation to change the culture of performance management in healthcare, and I think that's where simulation can really have a massive impact in the coming years, and indeed has already had a massive impact. And this is a slide, it's quite old now, but I would say that in some cases you'd still find this kind of data now, that if you look at the aviation world, 100% of pilots when surveyed decided that they would be quite willing to make mistakes and to discuss those and report those mistakes, whereas only 30 and 56% of healthcare workers said the same. And I think until we can get 100% of mistakes reported and talked about, we're always going to struggle. And it struck me earlier in the discussion that when we talk about feedback and debriefing, which absolutely is crucial, and you can do massive harm with that, with inappropriate debriefing, one of the core messages that we need to get across to everybody is that everybody accepts, or should accept, that everybody makes mistakes, and that it's not a bad thing to discuss them and realise that you do make mistakes. And obviously one of the things that we all see all the time is people coming into simulation centres very nervous about showing how good or bad they are in front of peers, and that's something we've got to get past. So it's a changing world. All organisations, I think, are now embracing simulation. The resources, however, are still very patchy. Money is definitely scarce and scarcer. Digital learning, though, as a result, is expanding rapidly, and there's a competency assessment focus for sure in terms of using simulation now. And high-tech simulator markets are, to some extent, contracting here in the UK. There's only a limited number of simulators people can buy. So we have to combine education, teaching people what they need to know, the training, which is the face-to-face simulation, and finally assessment. And ultimately the goal must be to combine competence with confidence. And as someone said earlier again in the session today, it's the confidence bit that sometimes is lacking, even if we can identify that they're competent. One of the symptoms of both the work that ASPIH has done and also the world of simulation is that the Nursing and Midwifery Council have asked me to put this slide up. We went to see them this week, and they are embracing and contacting ASPIH now and working with us, and they have got this consultation out announcing a radical overhaul of nursing education. And as some of you who are not nurses or not from this country may not know, they actually mandate or advise 300 hours of simulated practice in education, and they're looking to change that. And they don't quite know how to change that, so they're asking for your feedback. So please, if you are in that world, go onto their site and complete that consultation. It closes in about 12 weeks, I think. And the medical education world is also changing. So we're talking to the GMC, who are clearly moving now from a curriculum-based management, if you like, of medical practice into a competency-based focus. So anyone can learn in a whole range of different ways now. You can't control that anymore. So they're really now focusing on trying to assess competence and making sure that everyone is fit for practice. But as part of that is education, and education is very expensive. Face-to-face education is extremely expensive, as you can see here with some of these courses. So the problem is that there's a limited amount of money for that expensive education. It's difficult to access. We've, as I'll allude to in a minute, put together some face-to-face courses. It's extremely difficult to get people out of their workplace these days for a day or two or three. But there's a requirement to practice and a requirement for continual professional development, CPD. So how do we do that? So there's a new learning world, and technology is moving very quickly. So there's two examples here where you can practice surgery anytime, anywhere on a mobile phone now. There's a company called Touch Surgery, which I'll mention again later, who have developed well over 40 surgical procedures you can do on your phone, anytime, anywhere. There are sites like MedTube, which is the other graphic on this slide here, which has got 13 to 14,000 training videos for surgeons to go and practice. The problem with the video bank is that there's no quality assurance. It's just there. You've got to work your way through it to find out which ones you want to look at. But a recent survey of medical learners found that 80% own an iPhone and use it to access the internet resources while in clinical learning. And I think this is going to be the new world now, as Stefan said, where you're trying to get a digital education program matched to a simulation education program. So we've set up our own academy to try and get into this world and to try and help us as an association to move forward. So we've collaborated already with a couple of companies, and certainly will be collaborating in a more formal way with CAE through this academy. But we've licensed in, or not licensed in, we're helping to support an online authoring collaboration program called IRIS, which allows people to come together in a virtual environment to author simulation content in a controlled, managed, and secure environment. And one of the things that we're trying to do with that and help that is to stop people reinventing wheels. We all know there's thousands of courses out there, and this helps to drive a greater collaboration. I sit on one of the HEE expert panels, and there's a continual tension in this country, and I'm sure in others too, between collaboration and income generation. So you want to collaborate, you want to share, but actually some people in the organisation, particularly high up, go, oh no, we've invented that, we've got that, we need to income generate from it. And that's holding people back. And it's enabling people to reinvent the same course 15 times. IRIS gets away from that by driving an educational-based collaborative authoring process. We've also started to work with an organisation called Medics Academy, who have developed an online learning platform which is pretty unique, available global anywhere in the world in terms of educational content. So as part of the National Association, we're looking to try and drive these new technologies and make people aware of them so that people move from course development into a digital learning world where they can get access to new, very high quality e-learning rather than just the normal slide set stuff, and finally into the classroom, into the simulated environment to move from education and training. And traditional simulation certainly is not going away and has a major, major role in all of this. So there's a rapid increase, for example, in situ simulation in the UK, taking simulators out into the ward, out into the workplace, out into the community. Just been a very good paper published about using simulation in the general practice world and showing a whole range of different issues that general practice needs to deal with, and that's going to expand. So technology needs to provide solutions to problems, and I think Stefan's given us a great insight in how to do that. Look at what the problem is for your customer and then provide the simulated and training answer to that problem. Not go and buy 3 mannequins and then work out what to do with them, which certainly when I was in this world 15 years ago selling stuff, we sold mannequins to one hospital, and then we sold 3 mannequins down the road to another, and all of them sat in boxes for a while before people worked out what to do with them. So centres need to focus on major impacts. Value needs to be established, and not monetary value, patient safety and quality value. And I think we do need to stop reinventing courses, and certainly in the UK, in a public health system, stop trying to compete with each other. Once we do that, we might be able to sell the expertise outside of the NHS and income generate as a result. And sell at the highest level possible, and by that I mean go to the chief executive of a trust and sell the benefits of simulation and make sure that they understand that it's solving their problem, which might be something like staff turnover. It might not be an obvious solution that they're looking to solve with simulation. A few years ago, we did a national scoping project, and we came up against these barriers to adoption. And the last 3, lack of evidence of effectiveness, lack of standards, and the need for better coordinated training, is where we started to develop new solutions. And so we worked with, and do work with, the BMJ, and have a BMJ STEL journal, which publishes fully peer-reviewed evidence of simulated practice and its impacts on health and care. And I think the impact of research evidence across the world, there's a number of different journal groups now like this, the evidence base is now significant. The problem is getting access to it by the people who need to understand it, and we're trying to help with that process. We've also, as you saw, identified the need for standards, and we have our own standards in the UK, which have been over a 2 or 3 year consultation process. And these standards now split into faculty, technical personnel, activity and resources. They're available free on our website, and I would recommend you have a look at them if you're involved in the UK or indeed outside of the UK, as one example of how national standards might drive up quality. And our next process in this journey is to produce accreditation frameworks based on these standards, which are now being implemented across the UK. One thing close to my heart is actually team building and the ability for people to work together. And we've heard again this morning about the way people think and the way people remember and the differences. I think if we're going to do multidisciplinary training, I've heard that's going to happen for the last 15 years. We need to understand how we react ourselves to people and how other people react to us. So if you're an extrovert, how you react to an introvert and vice versa in terms of the qualities of the person. And Myers-Briggs is one of the most researched personality profiling systems, and I would recommend again you have a look at this if you're doing multidisciplinary training as a mechanism for taking it forward, because people are starting to look at this now in a more scientific way. So rapid developments in new technology are here now. Virtual reality is here. Augmented reality is here. CAE have a number of types of application of this with the simulation. I've mentioned about mobile phone technologies. The way people learn in terms of use of digital platforms is going to go through a massive change over the next 2 or 3 years, and simulation needs to embrace that and work with it, because the combination, as I said earlier, of these things with the new technologies is going to really transform the impact of simulation and provide some of those things I mentioned earlier, because once we get this right, we will be very, very close to what's always been regarded as the holy grail of medical simulation in terms of the aviation world, and the fact that someone can learn to fly a 747 or A380 as it would be now in a simulator without ever having seen the real thing. Now that's actually a bit of a myth, to be honest, but they can get very, very close. And we are getting very, very close in this world with a combination of these technologies to simulate totally real environments for our learners. And already now we're starting to see companies coming out with very, very realistic online simulations, combining the mobile phone application with virtual worlds that you can walk through, either through headsets on computers, and then go into the real simulation environment to practice those skills and assess them and go around that loop again. And this is the way things are going to be done in the future. And I think it's an extremely exciting time to be involved in simulation, because now finally we're getting to a point where I think a combination of these technologies could allow us to fundamentally change the way medical and healthcare education is delivered. And then there's assessment, finally. Assessment is already happening, so Leadell have got their CPR assessment system now that they've launched, which measures objectively how good people are at CPR. And you might think, well, is that really needed? Well, I can tell you the data, it certainly is. Because you can't really practice CPR properly on real people. You can only do it on simulators, and they've got some technology which allows us to do that. And that's really taking things forward, I think, just in that one field. CAE have got various simulators that take assessment data into them. And in fact, the first simulator, it's probably still one of the best I think I've ever seen, that we sold that HT Medical built originally, and I think CAE are about to relaunch, is a colonoscopy simulator way back in 1999-2000. That measured how many times someone hit the bowel wall between going in and getting round to the appendix. And it was a clearly objective measure of how good people were at that skill. And we used to have it on exhibition stands, and consultants would come up, they'd do the simulator, they'd be absolutely terrible, and they'd blame the simulator. I noted their name just in case I ever went for a colonoscopy and they were doing it, because it was clear that the simulator could, and there was published data for this in 1999-2000, that the competency measurement was possible, even in those days. Now it's clearly possible. Touch surgery, every time you're on their app, measure A, that you're on it anywhere in the world, and B, how many times you've done that procedure and how good you are at it. Now you might think, wow, that's Big Brother watching me here, but how great that is, it doesn't mean that if you've taken 5 times to learn that procedure versus the person next to you who's done it first time, that you're worse. It just means you've got a different learning cycle, that's all. And if we can understand that and get that data, we can match the learning to the customer need. To fast track people, for example, whose dexterity, and I can tell you this is happening clearly now with the younger generation, the gaming generation, their dexterity skills are way better than certainly mine would be at 20. And so if you're doing laparoscopic surgery, you can probably fast track those people much faster through the learning process, through simulated practice than was the case in the past when we were practicing on patients. So in summary then, simulation practice is embedded, I think now. It's arrived, it's here, it's a key platform for education and competency assessment. In the UK, our standards, I think, are going to, and already are, driving enhanced quality and driving consistency of performance, and over and above that, a professional approach to designing scenarios and courses against those standards, and will drive a consistency across both the UK and across the world. We still need more research evidence, but that research evidence is already there in some cases, and it doesn't necessarily have to be fully peer-reviewed. The journal has work in progress. We have had, I think, 230, something like that, abstracts submitted to our conference this year. And the work that's going on at there is absolutely fantastic. We just need to capture it, disseminate it back out across the community to make sure we don't just repeat the same thing in 5 different centres. And we need to drive the benefits of simulation to the wider audiences, which from ASPIH's perspective includes the politicians, to make sure they understand when a politician stands up with a problem in the House that simulated practice and simulation in all its forms can actually solve even their problems that they have. And technology will move rapidly towards blended and VR-based modalities, as I said. And finally, simulation-based education and technology-enhanced learning has the potential to transform health education, and most importantly, patient safety. We all know it works. We just need to get it out there in all these forms and make sure that we are continuing to evangelize what is now a technology and a platform and a science that's established but needs to be better resourced. Thank you. Do you know, when I put this session together, Mark, I tried to find a picture of Alex Ferguson at Manchester United and put my head on top of his, but my Photoshop skills just didn't happen. And yes, you can imagine me as Manchester United manager, not.
Has anybody got a question or two for Andy as he's here? Or maybe you can catch him because it's been a long day.
To go.
I know. Well, just want to say before I bring up Kieran and Rob, it's on behalf of Stefan, Petra and myself. Firstly, thank you to all the presenters and facilitators. It's your abstracts that actually drives the content for this conference. So without your great work submitting, we wouldn't have any program to put together. So I can still see there's a few facilitators, so please let's give them a huge round of applause. I'd also like to thank all the chaps wearing very dark polo tops, the team from Trent Simulation who have been broadcasting for the last 2 days. So guys, take a bow. Because they have made, I've had lots of texts from people, my friends in India, who have been watching a lot of the content. So they've really been part of the conference. And on behalf of all the presenters, I thank you to the audiovisual team. So that's from the Academy perspective. For things like evaluations and certificates, you will be getting a link in the next 7 days or so. If you don't fill in the evaluation form, you don't get your certificate. I'm going to re-emphasise that. So now I'd like to hand over to Mr. Kieran Feeney and Mr. Robert Murray.
I don't really have anything to say, folks, apart from thank you so much for coming. So Mandy's done a lot of thank yous. I think on day one, Robert said we had 150 plus people from 18 different countries. I mean, that's just fantastic. So thank you for holding on in till the end. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your schedules for being here. We really appreciate it. We understand it's not easy. So I hope you all had a good conference. I hope you can all go away having learned something. I just want to reiterate what Mandy said as well. You will receive an email regarding feedback. Please fill it in if you have the time. We changed the conference a lot this year and the back of last year. Feedback we take seriously, we read it all, and we will tailor conferences around your feedback, so that's really important. Most of the CAE team are packing away, but I want to thank all them. It's a lot of work to go in this conference. It takes a lot of work and a lot of preparation, and they've all done a great job. We've had people fly over from the States, Canada, to help us out, which has been fantastic. And a special thank you to Mandy, who really puts a huge amount of work into this conference, and Rob and I can sometimes be a little bit demanding, but she's done a great job putting up with us, and she's put a fantastic schedule together, and it's all about the schedule. So I don't think Carla's here, but Carla kind of project manages the whole thing, and she's got a pretty stressful job, and she did a fantastic job as well. We're really happy with the way the conference has run. We're happy we had so many people here, just generally happy. So enjoy the rest of your week. Oh, thanks guys, I just wanted to thank you myself as well, and yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your week, have a safe journey home. We hope to see you again next year.